Welcome back to another episode. This is episode 21 of the Redefining Wisdom podcast, and a very special one for me because this podcast has just entered the top 1% of all podcasts in the world. Yay! And as a way to celebrate, I would love to share with you guys the story behind Redefining Wisdom podcast, how I came up with the idea, and even better yet, what inspired me to start a podcast to begin with, as somebody like me who is very introverted, shy, and socially anxious person, how I was able to overcome all of those fears, all of those anxieties, insecurities, and self-doubt for me to pursue this project. Last but not least, I'm going to also share with you all the lessons I've learned so far doing this that you could apply in any aspect of your life. So, let's dive in. First and foremost, what is Redefining Wisdom podcast and how I came up with the idea and what inspired me to do so. For me to tell you the story, I need to take you back in time, back in 2017, before we had high inflations, before we had to even worry about wars in Ukraine and wars in here and there, all over the place, when we were in a much better place. Well, 2017, I was driving to work. I worked at a job, by the way, did not enjoy at all. I was listening to NPR. Yeah, hold on. I get it. NPR, that was before, in 6 years, NPR went from decent, radio station to what it is right now. I get it. But back then, they were promoting this show, this podcast called How I Built This. This is a show that have a host called Guy Raz, amazing interviewer and a storyteller, that his job in this podcast was to interview rock stars entrepreneurs. By rock stars, I mean the people like Damon John, Mark Cuban, Kendra Scott, the founders of Southwest, the founders of the Stacy Pita Chips, the founders of RX Bar and Cliff Bar. All of these amazing entrepreneurs that started from nothing, no business knowledge, no business background, not funding, not nothing, and they were able to grow their business to hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in sales. The reason why I started doing this or started listening to this is because I wanted to have an idea. I wanted to get inspired and have a clue. Maybe if I get something from there, I can have an idea of what business I can do or I can launch or try later in my life. And by later in my life, I mean 2 years, in 3, maybe 5 years. But just to have a concept, I need to get my thoughts moving. I need to brainstorm and I need to get inspired and motivated by other people that have done it successfully. After 40 to 50 episodes, I did not get any business idea. Quack, quack, quack. Yeah, I know. I actually got something much better. Something that I was never expecting to even get from here. What I got from listening 40 to 50 episodes of How I Built This was that I had fallen in love with the storytelling. I had fallen in love with interviewing people, hearing those stories. And at that point, I realized that's what I want to do for a living. That's what I would love to do one day in my life. I would love to talk to people about interesting topics, things that are interesting to me, that I'm passionate about, and I can get knowledge from other people, especially when people tell you their stories, when there goes ups and downs, regardless whether you are a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company or somebody who just have a business that is making $500,000 to maybe $600,000 a year. You go through struggles, you go through emotional and mental challenges that either make you or break you. And those are so inspiring that to me, that's what I wanted to do. I had no idea. I was never expecting this. And at that point I said, one day I would love to have a podcast. But I even didn't have a concept, didn't have any idea. I didn't even know whether I was going to have a co-host, do it by myself, interviewing people. I had no clue about anything. So what did I do? I put that idea to rest. Because to me, the way that I felt about podcasts was Podcasts, I tell people, for me, for many years, was like having a Lamborghini. If one day I have a Lamborghini, awesome, super happy, super pumped. However, if it never happens, no big deal. I'll never regret not having a Lamborghini. You won't see me on my deathbed being, shit, my dream was to have a Lamborghini and it never happened. No, it would be a nice thing to have, but it doesn't. If it never happens, no big deal. That's how I felt about podcasts for a long time. It would be a cool project because guess what? I was so ignorant back then. Okay, no, I'm still ignorant, but back then I was even more ignorant. I didn't even know how podcasts made money. To me, well, if this is produced by NPR gets money from the radio station. That's how they are financing and paying this guy. I had no idea about affiliates and sponsorships and YouTube AdSense and nothing at all. I let that idea to rest and I didn't even touch it for years. Fast forwarding 2023, I'm just getting out of arguably the worst year of my life. 2022 was the most challenging year I've ever been or I've ever had in my life. Starting with early that year, I fell into the deepest depression I've ever been in my life. That kind of depression that the only thing that you want to do is lock yourself in the bathroom and cry. The only thing every morning when you wake up, you feel deep sadness that you don't understand where it comes from. And it's like day after day after day getting worse and worse and worse. It didn't matter whether I was driving to the gym or to the grocery store or to work. Most of the times, the only thing I wanted to do was to drive back home, lock myself in the bathroom, and cry. And this was weird for me because I thought I had everything. Now, I might not have a life direction. I might have been doing something that I didn't enjoy when it comes to work. But I had a wonderful wife. I have 2 beautiful, awesome cats. And financially, I was fine. I wasn't struggling. But yet, that depression was deep, strong. And long story short, I had to pull all the strength I had every single day just to make it through the day. So 2023, I'm getting out of it. I'm getting another blow from life, another punch in the gut in which my marriage completely fell apart, got divorced. And at that point, I thought that after losing it all, lost my home, lost my marriage, lost my cats, is that what do I want to do in my life? See, I'm making money in this job, decent money just to pay my bills, maybe travel every now and then. But do I want to do this for the rest of my life? I already lost everything. I was in the point of a career change. I used to be a financial analyst, and I wanted to go into the data analytics only because it was paying better. But at that point, I found myself at the crossroad because at that point, when I started questioning my life decision, when I started questioning what I wanted to do with my life, that idea, that seed that was planted back in 2018 of having a podcast, something that I would really enjoy, boom, came back. Automatically. I didn't even have to search for it. It just came back with not only the idea, but the concept and everything I wanted to do. I wanted to find mentors. I wanted to find people that I could learn from. These could be psychologists, it could be entrepreneurs, it could be athletes, it could be doctors, whatever, any person that I could learn from or get inspired by their stories, their struggles, their ups and downs, their successes, and all in between. I wanted that. So at that point in my life, I was at a crossroads between trying to start a career in the data analytics world or do the podcast. At that point, I had a few family members and friends that knew about this, that what they suggested, like, why don't you do both? Why don't you do both? You just have your full-time job and do the podcast on the side. Look, I know myself, and there's a famous quote or a famous saying in football that goes, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. To me, if I had done that, like a full-time job plus the podcast on the side, two things could have happened. Either one, I'm waiting until I feel confident enough to start the podcast, that it would have never happened because I would be comfortable with the income that I had while I'm getting ready. As remember, I mentioned highly introverted, shy, and socially anxious. So if I already have a source of income, okay, might not be great, but it's good enough or okay enough for me to keep going that route without even starting a podcast to begin with. Or the second option that could have happened was I started both and would have dropped the podcast after just a few episodes because I would have realized it was too much work. At that point, I thought to myself, I can always come back and build a career in data analytics. But the podcast, I don't have responsibilities. I have no partner, no kids, no pets, no nothing. If there's a perfect time to do it, it is now. If I don't do it now, if I don't try the podcast now, I will never do it. When I made that decision July 2023. My goal was from July 2023 to December 2023, learn as much as I could about podcasts, start creating content on Instagram and TikTok and all of that, because guess what? I had no social presence whatsoever, no social media presence whatsoever, and I needed to start creating this content. And my goal was in December, I'm going to start recording episodes. January, I'm start releasing. First week of January, I'm releasing the first episode no matter what. I'm giving myself 5 months to figure the fuck out. So that's what I did. One thing that it almost stopped me from even doing the podcast was when I saw that it seemed like everyone had a podcast. Even the neighbor's dog had a podcast. Can you imagine? And one thing that to me is so hard is when I see something that is trending, something that everyone is doing, I'm walking the other way. I'm just walking away. To me, there's no point, and there is a bloody red ocean. It is extremely oversaturated, and it seems like everyone found like, oh, it's so easy to have a podcast. Everyone gets views, everyone gets likes, everyone's making good money. At least that's the perception that a lot of people have. Why not us trying creating an oversaturated market or industry? You may wonder, well, if you knew this and all of this is true, why start the podcast? Because I went back to 2017, 2018, why I wanted to do the podcast. It wasn't because it was trendy. I didn't even know shit about podcasts back then. But the idea of interviewing cool people and being immersed in deep, meaningful conversations, as you know, as an introvert, you love that. If I could have that every single week, I'd be very happy. Doesn't matter what. In fact, I could win the lottery tomorrow and still be doing the podcast just because of the conversations are so rich and insightful. So that was my North Star. That was my reason. That was my why. Because it was always also going to help me to improve myself, because I would be talking to people that I could learn from and then hopefully share and help other people that are in similar situation that I was. Fast forward, 2024 begins. And I released the first episode. But that came at a great cost. All December, Christmas, and New Year's Eve, I just worked. I was so stressed. It was so hard for me because I had this vision of the podcast, how to launch it, how to try to make this big impact, even though I had no audience and no following. But I care and I pay attention to details, and I really want to make it as close to perfect as I could. And it was a lot. But there was nothing better. There was not a better feeling, but also scary the moment I released that episode on January 3rd, 2024. It was exhilarating because I kept my word. For years, I would try something for 3, 4, 5 months and I would quit. Say, okay, this is too hard. This is too difficult. I'm struggling here. I don't like it. I'm going to move on. I'm done. This time, even though I had self-doubt, I had those negative thoughts every single day during August, September, October, November, December. Every single day I was questioning myself, why you're doing this? Nobody's gonna listen to you. It's pointless. You have no personality, or you don't know how to talk, and you're not interesting, and all these negative thoughts every single time. And it was tough. It was a daily mental battle. The way that I got through it was by creating awareness of those negative thoughts. Creating awareness that those negative thoughts were not real. That I might have been the thinker of the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. And I had to remind myself every single day about that. And every time that I wanted to quit, which was, by the way, was almost daily, I told myself, let's not quit today. Tomorrow, we can quit tomorrow. Today, we're not. And I had to repeat myself that every single day. That's how I made it through, at least to all the way to January, when I finally released my first episode. The first few episodes were friends here in Austin that I asked them if they wanted to be interviewed, and I'm forever grateful with them that they gave me the honor to interview them and to start testing and supporting me in this personal project that I had. But also, as I said, it was exciting that I released the first episode. It was also scary because now was go time. The first step is the hardest. Once you take it, you need to keep going. If you stop, then you feel, well, I failed. I wasn't strong enough to do it. So that's why many people don't start something, because they know that once they take that first step, then it's go time. And there's nothing you can do, but you keep going. You have to keep going. When I started this podcast, I had a long list of A-listers, B-listers, C, D, and E-listers all over the place. To me, I thought, okay, I'm going to start with E-listers, but I'm going to email everyone I can. In my mind, booking guests should have been easier than what it was. We tend to underestimate how hard something is going to be. That's why a lot of people quit early on. Out of 95% of all messages, DMs, emails, anything that I did to reach out to people, they said no. They didn't even say no. They ignored those messages. It was like no response whatsoever. Out of the 5% remaining 4% of them, they replied to me. They said, we're busy right now, or even said, maybe we could do it, or yeah, why not? And then they would completely ghost me. Only 1%, literally 1 out of 100 would say yes. 1 out of 100 would give me a shot. But guess what? That's all I needed for me to keep the ball rolling. That's all I needed. Was it stressful? Yes. Was it frustrated? Oh, fuck yeah, it was. But that's what it needed to happen. Now, what lessons have I learned about this? When you have that inner desire, when deep inside from your heart tells you what you should be doing, just follow that voice. Everyone here knows what they're supposed to be doing. The problem is we let fear control us. Because guess what? When I had the idea of this podcast, it was the most terrifying thing. Me approaching people, approaching strangers, and having to talk to them for an hour. Somebody with social anxiety, like me, like myself, bro, that is the most terrifying thing ever. But the desire of following that, for the first time having like a true calling, or a direction for the first time that I never had it. I was one of those kids when I was 8 years old, 12, and even 15 or 16, I never ever knew what I wanted to do. Shit, I didn't even know when I was 30. I had the idea of podcasting, 2023, when I was already at that point 31. So no, it just, you never know. And in my case, having finally a sense of direction, was I going to let fear take that away from me? Almost. I almost did. But I said, let me keep pushing. Wasn't easy. And it was little by little, step by step, one step at a time. And one thing that I that helped me a lot is being kind to myself. Something that I've struggled for many years of my life. I judge myself quite a bit, and at some point I had to stop and celebrate the small wins. The small wins, whatever small thing I did, even if I sent out one email in a week, okay, that was a win. Even though the old me would have judged myself of, bro, what are you doing? One email? You should have sent 5 to 10 a day. So at least to have 25 to 50 a week, and you just did one. Well, celebrate the small wins. Start stacking them. If you keep a positive mindset, if you keep positive thoughts, if you keep positive emotions, you can gain momentum. That's one of the things that I've learned. That's what have helped me to stick to this long over here, even though it's just the beginning. In fact, I'm in the top 1% of all podcasts, which is ridiculous to even think. But why is that? Because if you don't know much about the podcast industry, 90% of all podcasts don't pass episode 3. And out of the 10% remaining, 90% of all those don't pass episode 20. So if you have 21 episodes, just like this one, you are by default in the top 1% of all podcasts in the world in the history of podcasts. Let that sink in for a second. That's how low the bar is. That's how quickly people quit. That's how quickly people give up. And I know that from experience. I did that a lot in my life. Every project I would start, I would do it, as I mentioned, 2, 3, 4 months at most, and then fuck this. I don't like it. I'm not gonna do it. It's too hard. Let me do something else. The power of consistency, the power of having a direction and believing in your project, believing what you're doing, is so incredibly large that if you just stick to those, you are going to reach new heights that you weren't even think that it was possible. Now, is my podcast successful now? Oh, hell no. I rarely have any views or listeners or downloads, but it's just the beginning. I'm just trying to figure this out and trying to get better. But I know I have so much more to grow, so much more to improve. I know that that my content is not very good. I'm aware of that, but that is good because my room for improvement is large, and I know as I'm aware of that, as long as I'm aware that I haven't picked yet, I have a good chance of making it happen. The only thing that in between me and the success or the point where I am now and success is all in here. It's your mind. If you stop believing yourself, if you give up, if you let fears control you, if you let those negative thoughts win, you're doomed. That's why I wanted to tell you this story, because here are some lessons that you could apply in any aspect of your life, even if you don't have a podcast. You know what you're supposed to be doing. Deep inside you know, but you don't want to do it. It's hard. It's difficult. It is scary. But guess what? So is regret. You don't want to look back 40 years from now, 50 years from now. It's like, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had to do, but never had the courage. As somebody who deals with fears daily, all I can tell you is those fears never go away. They never do. The anxiety every time that I'm about to interview a new person, even though I've done it 20 times already, it is still there. It doesn't get any easier. You just get better at it. Courage is not lack of fear. Courage is having the fear and do it anyway. And stop looking for daily or weekly gains. It is just hard to see. We tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in one day. and we tend to underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. If you give yourself 6 months, if you give yourself 1 year of trying one thing and putting your best and being consistent, you will be surprised of how far you can go with that. You will be surprised. And I'm on that experiment right now. And all I can tell you is that you have to trust whether God, the universe, life, that they're putting you in the right direction, that life is guiding you towards something better. But you have to listen and you have to take that leap of faith. That leap of faith that even if you fail, that failure was necessary for you to learn a lesson that you needed to learn, that will take you to another place where you will be successful. You just have to believe that. It's the only way. Having that kind of faith. I don't care whether you believe in God or not, or the universe or life, whatever. You have to have that faith that you are on your own path. And if you follow that voice, if you follow that desire, if you follow that feeling that is telling you do that, only good things can happen. And I hope that you, whatever you want to do in your life, just start now. Start taking action and start taking small steps. Regret weighs tons. Don't wait until you get to that point. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching or listening, and I'll see you next week.